Well, and it's not even action tonight, right?
It's 6%. It's
Yeah.
0.67 or 1%. Forget it.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah.
That's the whole vote.
Okay, well, I guess we're missing two board members.
No, we're here. We got a majority. Let's do it.
Yeah, why don't we actually call the meeting to order? Can we get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
All in favor?
Hey there, we got 4-1 vote.
Cheryl not here yet? Nobody's working the thing?
Cheryl's right there.
Oh, okay.
Well, we all raise our hands. It's a positive. Everybody agrees.
We've got a motion to approve A3.
Hearing number 4. Number 3 is for the hearing number 4. You want to move it?
Thank you. You're right.
All right.
Thank you for catching me right. Number 4.
So, Cheryl, we just approved on a 4-0 vote with
Yeah, try and
Dr.
keep up,
Evans
Cheryl.
late the motion to adopt the agenda. Now we've got a motion to adopt A4, the consideration of the general waiver request of Gompers. We've got a second. Any discussion? No? Please vote. Okay, administrative assignments. Is this a report out?
President Breyer, we have two, Mr. Ron Little to Chief Financial Officer, and a Biffle to Principal, Euclid Elementary School.
Great. Item A6, so this is approving the employment agreement for Ron Little as Chief Financial Officer.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
We're just cruising tonight.
We are cruising. Okay, and then,
We told them to bring mine.
so Phil, do you want to go over with us a little quandary we're in right now?
All right. Good evening. Good evening. What I'd like to do tonight is present to you very quickly the impact of our conditional approval by the county, and we're not asking you tonight to vote on anything. What we would like is some direction from you, perhaps a sense of the board on a choice that we have to make between now and when we come back to you again on September 7th. We will have another meeting September 7th regardless of what happens in the interim. Just to quickly give you an update that the latest information we have as of this afternoon is that tomorrow the SDA bill will be placed on the governor's desk along with two others, and that he's going to China at the end of the week. So that between tomorrow and the end of the week is the opportunity he has to sign, and all the indications that we have to this point is that he will do that. So that's kind of the latest information from a general perspective. We did, as you know, we did get a conditional approval. It was primarily based on the fact that of the SDA funding, which really has a $27 million impact on us in over a 3-year period of time. And then we got clarity from the county with regard to our $12 million COLA for next year, which we did include in our projections, and they're telling us that we should take that back out. So the bill, I've given you the update. It was unanimously passed by the Assembly, unanimously passed by the Senate, and is on the governor's desk and could be signed as early as tomorrow. Our first scenario that we want to present to you is that the bill is signed by the governor before he leaves, and we have that done by September 8th. In that case, our budget remains as it is because we have the revenue built in. The county has indicated to us that they would reissue a letter removing the conditional approval of our budget, but we still have to take an action on the 7th, which is why I said we still have to meet anyway, and that action would be approving the resolution that they've given us as Exhibit A in their original documentation, and that's really related to cuts that we have to make for 11-12 and 12-13. That removes the problem for us for this year, and we would be specifying at that time on the 7th, based on our unaudited actuals, the finalization of those numbers, and what we know related to everything else, what cut reductions have to be identified for the out years. So we have to do two things at that point in that resolution. We have to identify a list of the cuts that we would be making for 11-12 and 12-13, and we have to provide a timeline for those reductions from September 8th on through the point in time of adoption in next year through June. We have to present them a timeline. Now, scenario 2 is...
Can I just ask you?
Sure.
I might have been confused, but when we adopted our budget and submitted our budget to the county in June, at that time, were we required to identify the specific cuts necessary for 12-13?
We provided the specific list for 11-12.
For 11-12.
Yeah, and we identified the dollar amount for 12-13.
Yeah. So is that changed now? Do we have to, besides identifying...
We have to identify for 11-12.
11-12.
Yeah, and then
gotcha.
Identify the dollar amount for 12-13.
Okay, understood. So nothing's changed in that regard. Yeah.
Scenario number 2 is if AB 184 is not signed by the governor by September 8th, that puts us in a little bit more of a dilemma. And we're presenting to you 2 options that we as a district could take based on the governor not signing that. We can adopt a revised 10-11 budget on September 7th. It's actually 7th, and we would present it to the county on the 8th. That would reduce our reserve for economic uncertainties down to actually a number of about 0.92. Based on our numbers as we know them now, we're allowed by the state to go down to 0.67% of general operating expenditures plus $1. We believe that, based on our numbers right now, if we pulled out the revenue from SDA, that we would be at 0.92. We're at 2% now. So we would be going from 2% down to 0.92. That's a difference of $12.4 million. So we would meet the minimum requirement by the state for this year and beat it just a little bit. Now, the good news for us in that scenario is we would not have to make any more additional cuts on September 8th. We have the revenue and expenditures to balance the budget with a 0.92% reserve. The dilemma in doing that for us, if SDA never gets passed, if AB 184 never gets passed, it exacerbates our situation in 11-12 because we'd have to go back in 11-12 from 0.92 to 2% because our ability to go to 0.67 is limited to this year. Mm-hmm. Next year we'd have to go back to 2%, which is something we should be doing anyway. But that would be if the bill never passes, we would have to make up that money. Now, if the bill passes, but it passes after September 8th, we could plug that revenue from that bill. Our recommendation as a staff to you is that you take the first use of that money to build the reserve back to 2%, which would be a cost of about $12.4 million, and we could do that. Or that's the first choice. So what we're looking for tonight from you is a sense of, do we go to 0.92%, which meets the state minimum requirement of 0.67, or do we maintain our 2% reserve, acknowledge that we're going to lose $18 million in revenue for last year and this year, and therefore then have to make further reductions of $12.5 million that are not a list of reductions. I want to make a clear distinction. That's not a list of reductions and a time frame. That is reductions. We would have to make $12.5 million reductions between now September 8th, build those reductions in the appropriate line item in our budget, and then you would have to approve that revised budget. Now, the staff recommendations, our recommendation would be the first option for you at this point with what we know, all considered. We would recommend to you that we adopt a 0.92% reserve, and then if the SDA funds do pass, and as we believe, again, the governor will sign, that we then reinstate the reserves to 2%. And as I told you before, we must, regardless of the options that we choose, we do have to present a timeline, an implementation plan to resolve 11-12 budget deficit And again, as you can see, the variances and whether because the SDA is cumulative over a 3-year situation. So we're going to be somewhere between 141, 140, the numbers are still change a little bit, but we believe that our situation for next year, of course, will not be anywhere near what it would be if AB 184 certainly is approved. So, and then lastly here, we must certainly begin quickly, and we've already been meeting as a senior staff, we've been meeting as a finance staff to put together a process very, very quickly to begin the process for 1112, because that's going to be with us before we know it. So we're hoping, we believe AB 184 will pass. We truly believe that we'll be able to come back on the 8th, maintain our budget as it is. But in the event that it does not, we need the sense of the board on whether to go to 1.92 and or stay at 2 and go from there.
And I just one clarifying question. Part of the reason, Bill, you're asking for a sense of the board on this tonight is because if we say to you, go and find $12.5 million worth of cuts, you got to go and do that this
starting tomorrow morning. Yes, we'll be working full time between.
We had John, then Catherine, then John. Yeah, John at the back.
Having worked, I'll say, our fannies off for years to get to 2%. I'm not very comfortable with dropping below that. That said, I honestly believe the staff recommendations are an alternative. Just basically is, and by the way, what did pass, but it just didn't get signed by the governor.
That's correct.
So the question isn't whether or not the bill got passed, but whether the governor will sign it.
Correct.
That may be a coin toss, but I'm willing to say that I would move the staff recommendations with the emphasis on making sure we have done all we can to maintain the reserves at 2%. So that means that if the alternative is negative, that we are going to see some kind of alternative of how to get there.
Yeah, my concern in doing this, and I think that the staff has an obligation to tell us this. I'm always concerned about our credit rating and what's going to happen when we lower that 2%, and then what kind of loans we're going to be paying for, amortized over years. What is the cost to us in lowering that reserve? Is it greater than 12, less than 12? What facilities? It's not only our trans notes, but Proposition S. I just assume, I agree with lowering that interest rate, but if the governor doesn't sign it, I think we need to look for the cuts, and make sure we get that reserve back up to 2%, because, again, it's not rocket science. It's simply, what type of interest rate we're going to be paying on the trans notes, and we know we're going to be doing that for years because apparently the legislature doesn't know how to balance a budget like we do, on time. And, I at least would like to have an idea of what's the, amortized cost of this over a period of years. What are we signing up for? Sure, it sounds good. Let's dip into our savings but again, our credit rating and our credit agencies are going to want to be alerted to that, and they're going to want to know. I don't think we should walk into that blindly. But I think if it's a temporary fix until the governor gets his act together and signs this, as I'm hopeful that he will, given that his family's involvement in Special Olympics and all the rest of that, I would think he'd be sympathetic to this. So, but if he doesn't sign it, I think we need to bring it back to the board again immediately and start looking for cuts, and whether or not that's palatable. Maybe those numbers don't balance out, but I'd like the opportunity to see if it does.
Okay.
Well, that's in my motion, actually. Was just to take the staff recommendations.
Second. That's how it looks like.
Yeah, I also support the staff recommendation. I think it has been emphasized by everybody. It's very important to have a reserve, and because we have maintained a reserve is the reason that we're actually able to deal with this particular short-term emergency. And so I understand this is exactly what a reserve should be used for, on a short-term basis to get through a difficult situation. So the options have been pretty clearly laid out. Either the governor will sign it in time. If he doesn't sign in time but it's still there, we have the reserves to cover for it with the county. And then obviously our expectation is that if these monies are taken away, that we will have to sit down and figure out how to reconstitute our reserve as soon as possible. So I think it's a good move.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that. If we come back next week and the governor is yet to sign the bill, I think it would be helpful for maybe a memo from Monica, letting us know what the situation is. Is it that he just didn't get around to signing it? Is it that he's got objections? And does Monica have an analysis of the potential for the legislature to override a veto if he vetoed it? That kind of thing would be helpful.
Yes, we'll do that. In fact, we have made a regular connection with her, and that's how we've been able to track where the bill is. And in fact, I can't tell you how many intersections we've had here in the last 3 weeks. At one point, I think a week ago Friday, we were talking with his chief of staff to get that kind of personal touch to find out, are there any issues here? Let's just keep pushing this. And I think the testimony to our San Diego legislative representatives who moved this through both the Assembly and the Senate unanimously, I think, says we're all there. Just sign the bill.
The bill passed the Finance Committee, the Appropriations Committee, and both houses unanimously. So it would
and
be
just
astounding.
Make one just quick public acknowledgement and thank you to Assemblymember Marty Block for carrying this bill forward for us. Good. Well, I think you have a sense of the board. I don't think we need to vote tonight. Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. This meeting is adjourned.
All right.